Hello, everyone. This is Admiral Jamie Fogo, Dean of the Center for Maritime Strategy of the Navy League of the United States in Washington, D.C. You're listening to Maritime Nation, a podcast designed to dive deeply into the policy challenges facing America's sea services and the role of the United States as a sea power on the global stage. We aim to provide you with the highest quality analysis on the most pressing maritime security challenges by joining in conversation with key partners and practitioners. Today, we are bringing you a special episode of Maritime Nation to close out the season from 2023 and prior to the kickoff of the Surface Navy Association's 36th National Symposium this week. The Center's Navalist and frequent co-host of Maritime Nation, Dr. Steve Wills, joins me in conversation today with two great naval officers who are not just leading the future of the surface Navy, but building it too. We have Vice Admiral retired Rick Hunt, President of the Surface Navy Association and President of Fincantieri Marinette Marine, as well as Captain retired Mark Vandroff, CEO of Fincantieri Marinette Marine. Welcome to the program, shipmates.
Thank you.
Before we dive in, let me tell you a bit about these two gentlemen. Vice Admiral Hunt graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1975 with a Bachelor of Science in Bacteriology. He was commissioned in February 1976 through the Officers Candidate School program in Newport, Rhode Island. He attended Naval Postgraduate School, receiving a Master of Science in Telecommunications Systems Management in March of 1988. Vice Admiral Hunt served in USS Sampson, DDG-10, USS Underwood, FFG-36, USS Rourke, FF-1053. He was commanding officer of USS Cromlin, FFG-37, from August 93 to May 95. During this time, he deployed as part of the Kitty Hawk Battle Group in support of Korean contingency operations. In July 2005, he assumed command of Carrier Strike Group 6, the John F. Kennedy Strike Group. What a great ship. Additionally, he served as Commander, Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa for United States Central Command from April 2006 to February 2007. He was commander of U.S. 3rd Fleet from June 2009 to April 2011, and commander Naval Surface Forces, Naval Surface Force U.S. Pacific Fleet from June 2011 to July 2012. Then he became director of the Navy staff in August 2012 and retired from the United States Navy in November 2013. And Rick, that was a job that I had after you, and I know how hard that was to herd the cats in the Pentagon. So thanks very much for your service. Captain Mark Vandroff assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer of Fincantieri Marinette Marine, Marinette, Wisconsin, in July of 2021. Prior to that, he was the Senior Vice President of Business Development for Fincantieri Marine Group in Washington, D.C. Immediately prior to joining FMG, Mark served as the Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Defense Policy on the National Security Council staff at the White House. In this role, he served as the President's Senior White House Advisor on a broad array of matters, including defense capabilities, irregular and non-traditional warfare, strategic weapons, international security cooperation, military personnel, emerging defense technology, and space security. Wow. Before a civilian career, Mark served in the United States Navy, retiring from active duty with the rank of captain. His command level tours included service as the major program manager for the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that are doing so well right now in the Red Sea, and commanding officer of Naval Surface Warfare Center, Carter Rock, Maryland. Now, for those of you that don't know, Carter Rock is one of my favorite bases, and it's home to the biannual man-powered submarine races in Carter Rock every other year. Magnificent tow tank, open to the civilian community. So if you get a chance to see that, you should go take a look. Mark holds a Bachelor of Science in Physics from the United States Naval Academy and a Master's in Applied Physics from the Johns Hopkins University. And he earned the Gold Medal for Engineering Excellence from the American Society of Naval Engineers. You can't say anything more about that. So let's dive into it. We start each episode of Maritime Nation with a term from my Naval Terms Dictionary, which I got as a plebe of the Naval Academy in 1977. I cannot think of a better term to kick off this episode than the definition of a frigate. And here's what it says. In the days of sail, a full-rigged ship mounting guns on a single gun deck, fast and maneuverable, comparable to the cruisers of a later day. The British Navy used frigates as adjuncts to their battle fleet for scouting and signaling, etc. The United States Navy designed and used them for ocean raiders, able to defeat anything fast enough to catch them. Now, ladies and gents, my colleague, Dr. Steve Wills, is not just a navalist, but a retired naval officer and a former frigate sailor. Steve cut his teeth on the USS Vandroff FFG 48, an Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate. Steve, tell us a little bit about the Vandroff before we turn over to these two guests.
Hey, thank you very much, sir. And I do remember the dog, Jenna. She was quite a character. When I was on Vandroff in the late 1990s, it was a state-of-the-art platform. Certainly for its time, it was a Mod 6 CORT frigate, which stands for Coherent Receiver Transmitter. So you had an improved number of fire control channels that you could operate with. You had improved ability to see and respond more rapidly to threats, especially as a tactical action officer. And we were out there in the FD&F Navy and 7th Fleet, so we were always busy and doing things. But despite the fact that Vandroff had all these capabilities, and it was, as a frigate, is a complete, compact, capable warship with all the warfare areas represented, albeit, less than a cruiser or destroyer, we were fully capable of the missions that we had out there at that time. But I'm looking forward today, especially to talking about what a quantum leap that the new frigate is going to be over the FFG-7 class. So looking forward to this conversation, sir.
Well, absolutely. So starting with Admiral Hunt, and Rick, if I may, you served on 3 frigates, Underwood, Rourke, and then as commanding officer of Cromlin. Is there anything you'd like to add as an opener to Steve's endorsement of the frigate?
Yeah, actually, there is. One of the things that I would say about frigates is that they have always provided engagement. And when I talk engagement, that's with others. So allies, potential competitors, and maybe folks in between. And I think that's absolutely critical. So you think about what we have done in the past with going out globally in our sailing ships and beyond, engaging with other nations and making a difference. Actually, diplomats at one stage, maybe not quite so much now as in history with better communications, but certainly very important. And so beyond the independent operations capability that frigates provide, escort duty when necessary, providing needed combat capabilities to strike groups or numbered fleets, the partnership opportunities to engage with our allies and those that we would like to ally with, because they're the right size, the right draft, they can get in after an exercise or an operation and actually sit down across the table, have a cup of coffee, tea, beer, and engage and develop long-lasting relationships, unlike almost any other class of vessel in the United States Navy. That is fundamentally critically important in my mind. So they do strongly contribute to our warfighting capability. They will help win wars with necessary, but equally important, they'll fill that role of partnership development, which is so critical to preventing wars in the first place. Let's build a coalition to include intel and alliances and prevent the conflict. That's what FFGs can do. That's what frigates have done throughout the history in the United States with the frigate Navy. So I think that's an important piece. I'll put one other comment in there. When I was 3rd Fleet, the number one demand ship was FFG 7 class Oliver Hazard Perrys. That includes ballistic missile shooting DDGs for that partnership and relationship development requirement out there. A lot of people don't understand that, but that's an important piece.
That is understandable, Rick, especially to me as a former Sixth Fleet commander. And I think we've just done a two-part series in our online journal, which we call the Mock, Takeoff on the Maritime Operations Center. Part one before Christmas was sundowning the Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate. And I had Simpson in my theater. She was the last of the Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates to decommission. And I shed a tear when she went away. It was a great ship. Part two for the new year is huzzah! There's a new frigate on the horizon, and that's the new Fincantieri Marinette Marine frigate Constellation class that's coming out. So in my first article, Rick, I talked about sundowning the Oliver Hazard Perry, and we did so without a replacement. Do you have any comment on that? I mean, I think you were on active duty at the time. Why'd the Navy do that? How are we recovering? Over.
Great question. And I certainly was not part of the decision-making process at all. But I would offer when that happened, it was a different time. So the wall had come down. There really wasn't a threat at sea. We were looking at doing new and different things. And so one of the available opportunities was the Littoral Combat Ship that was still out there in development and kind of before the competition really got going full speed. But we were looking at a ship with flexibility, mission module concept, and that fit the bill, right? And we thought that was good. So flexibility and mission requirements at a lower cost was the right thing to do at that time. And I would say not unlike, maybe a time before when you had both the Spruance class destroyer and Oliver Hazard Perry. We had to make a down select between one of those. The time for that was keep the frigate because of the missile capability, the manning construct, the economical presence that they brought. So it's not without precedence that Navy has to make tough decisions. That was one. Times have changed since then, though.
Right. And times indeed have changed. The Navy did change its mind. It started to look for, it did an analysis of the need for the frigate as a blue ocean platform after we sundown Oliver Hazard Perry. And then around 2018, 2019, there was a competition for a replacement. Admiral Hunt, you were retired and working for FMG at the time, and you were heavily involved in the process of this competition. How did you create a winning strategy?
It's interesting. When we approached going after the frigate, the unique thing was that we started with a terrific design. The Italian ASW Frem, which in my opinion, and I've been on an awful lot of ships around the globe, is the best frigate on the planet today. So we started with a very good parent design, and I wanted to hold to those strengths as much as possible. So I approached going after the competition with taking a look at attributes with challenges that I struggled with while I was on active duty. Things like manpower, things, like maintenance, the reliability aspect, being able to be flexible and develop to grow into new warfighting capabilities. So we built upon the Italian Frem and a couple of the key things. Again, these areas that plagued me while I was on active duty kind of go as I'll summarize. Sailor habitability. It was starting to become
Really
obvious
important.
that
Really important.
Absolutely. This goes to retention and recruiting. And I would tell you, when I was on my first ship, Samson DDG-10 in the Gulf, without air conditioning in the berthing spaces, I was ready to get out of the Navy just because it was a terrible lifestyle that we were, put in, day out. Still in the Navy today, we have 30 and 60 person bunk rooms, people piled on top of each other. we had the opportunity, looking at the FREM, to take what they had in there and go to a stateroom construct for 2, 4, 6, people to a stateroom area. Phenomenal. So that was one, and that came out of the parent design. Design adaptability, margins for growth, particularly electrical power. All of our ships eventually struggle with electrical power and concurrently with cooling to be able to handle that stuff. So that goes to kind of upsizing the ship a little bit. We made it 9 meters longer. We added the displacement of about 500 tons, so we could go to bigger diesel generators and provide more power. We're providing 12 megawatts of power for the ship right now, which is the same thing that we have on a Flight 3 brand new DDG. Think about that. And we have growth to almost double that with reasonably small engineering changes to the design as we're constructing it now. So getting the margins right with the flexibility, not only meeting the requirements today, but for the future, is really, really important. And we did that. So hybrid power gives you that. It also gives you the opportunity to be very, very quiet because you don't use a reduction gear. You run off electric propulsion motors, driven by ship service, the diesel generators. It gives you about a 30% fuel savings for on-station staying time or transit distances. Really, really important. Think about that. So that I wrestle with those in the far reaches of the Pacific. The next thing goes to introducing condition-based maintenance, a construct that is used globally very successfully, both in the military and commercially, but not in the U.S. Navy yet, although we've tried to do pilots, and we've always tried adding the capability to existing platforms. Not the right way to do it. You got to build it from ground up so that you get the sensors and the network hooked in the right way from the very beginning to do a different construct for maintenance. And so we added that, and that's a game changer. Hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that. That may be the most important new capability that we're providing through the ship, by the way. Safety becomes very important. I think the bridge design has atrophied on ships over the last couple of designs. And we're going open. I call it seeing the sea from the bridge, getting people to do what we've done for hundreds of years, and that's watch things around you. And that comes from the collisions in the Western Pacific that we all lived through. And I think part of that is providing the right environment designed for the sailor to do the right things, looking through those binoculars and keeping track of stuff. And then providing all the electronic capability, kind of like in a heads-up display below the radar, below the visual horizon. So it's not distracting, it's additive in the right information at the right time. Cybersecurity. Again, as you know, right before I retired in a couple of different 3-star jobs, I think the most critical piece that we need to work on is our ability to increase cyber resilience. This will be, I believe, the first platform, aviation, ship, submarine, doesn't matter, that is designed from the ground up with cyber resilience embedded in it. A topic that I discussed with Admiral Gilday every time I gave him an update on the frigate competition, and then the design once we were awarded going forward. That becomes critical to everything that we do. The next war will start and maybe end with cyber attacks, and we're going to be ready for that. And finally, I would say ASW. So ASW conducted against latest generation diesel submarines requires active capability below the layer, and that's variable depth sonar. We're providing that. I think we're providing it with the very best one available in the world today with a CAPTAS 4, and that's going to be a game changer against that combat capability that always scared me the most as a CO or a strike group commander. So it was all those attributes, all those capabilities that we made sure were highlighted in our design that I think put us in a very solid best value competition to win the competition for FFG 62. And we're proud of what we're producing.
Well, Rick, what a great rundown. And, some of the things you said are just music to my ears as a nuke. 12 megawatts of power and potentially capable of doubling that in future generations. The ship electric drive, which is very quiet. And we strive to do that in the submarine force, especially with Columbia coming up. 30% fuel savings. That's a significant reduction in carbon footprint. And people want to hear that nowadays. And then I couldn't agree with you more on cyber in your discussions with Admiral Gilday. And on ASW, let's take a look at what happened over Christmas. President Xi Jinping personally installed a new defense minister who was his CNO and a new CNO who was his lead submariner. So, he gets it. As I say, he's read Robert Kaplan's book, Asia's Cauldron, now understands this is the maritime century,
Yeah.
not the maritime decade. I want to get over to Mark Vandroff. We'll talk more about condition-based maintenance because I think that's revolutionary. But Mark, so we're building the Constellation-class frigate on the Great Lakes in Wisconsin. I want to give you an opportunity to tell us about the yard, how it's evolved. I know that FMM has put a $300 million investment in that yard in Wisconsin since 2009. I'd like to give you the opportunity to brag about your people and also maybe tell us, you're building a ship on the Great Lakes. How do you get it out into the ocean? Over.
So, Jamie, thanks for those questions. I'll start with your last one first, and I'll get into a brief history of the yard here. The yard started in 1942 as the Marinette Marine Corporation, founded by one of the local families. It built a lot of different products over the time, but in the 1940s, the only way you could get something built here out the Great Lakes would be to sail it down to Chicago, and it had to fit on a barge that could then go through the Chicago River and then through the lock system to the Mississippi River down to the Gulf of Mexico. So anything you built for the outside world had to be fairly small. And they actually supported, the yard originally supported the war effort in World War II with landing craft because you could stack those on barges and get them down the Mississippi River. But you couldn't build ships for customers really on the Atlantic until the later 1950s when the St. Lawrence Seaway opens up. Once the St. Lawrence Seaway opens up, you've got a series of locks that takes you from the Great Lakes to the St. Lawrence River. A Constellation-class frigate, as designed, will fit through the St. Lawrence Seaway, so we'll be able to go through the Great Lakes, out the St. Lawrence Seaway. I would say from a surface combatant, the St. Lawrence Seaway has depth constraints, height constraints, because you have to get under certain bridges. You have to get above, you can't go too deep in a lock, and then it's got width constraints. I would say that our frigate right now fits comfortably, but without a whole lot of extra room. So we'll just get through that at the current design. But that Marinette has had a history of building buoy tenders for the Coast Guard and one icebreaker for the Coast Guard. So we built stuff here before that has been able to deploy to customers around the world through the St. Lawrence by using the St. Lawrence Seaway. Fincantieri, which is a worldwide shipbuilder. It's an Italian company, but it has shipyards not only in Italy, but in Norway and Romania and Vietnam. It has, and Brazil, and it has cooperative partnerships with shipyards in India and the United Arab Emirates. And it's got shipyards here in the United States. My yard here in Marinette, across the other side of Green Bay in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. We have an aluminum fabrication shop in Green Bay. We have a repair yard now down in the Jacksonville, Florida area. So Fincantieri is a worldwide shipbuilder. Since they bought the shipyard in 2009, there's been significant investment both here and over at Sturgeon Bay. If you add up both yards, together since 2009, it's over $500 million of capital investment by Fincantieri in these yards.
Wow, that's great.
Specifically to get ready for the frigate, here in Marinette, there have been 4 major investments, and I'll go through those. The first major investment is the building of what we call the frigate erection bay. So before frigate, we built LCS, which we're now coming to the end of. All of my LCSs are in the water. The third to the last has gone through acceptance trials. The second to last and last are both very far along in construction. They'll do trials next year and deliver to the Navy, or not next year, it's this year now. In 2024, both of them will go on acceptance trials and deliver to the Navy. And then we're building a derivative of the LCS, the multi-mission surface combatant, as a foreign military sales case for the Royal Saudi Naval Forces. The ships, we build ships in buildings here and then roll them into the water, put them in the water. We don't build the ships outside. So you build modules and then you erect those modules under cover. The building that we had allowed us to erect 2 LCS MMSC size ships side by side during their construction, and is a great facility, but not big enough to erect a Constellation class frigate. So we finished last year the building that gives us 2 bays where we can do a Constellation class frigate, and again, in a third. So each bay is 1 1/3 ship lengths long. So you can do the whole ship, plus you can be working on the next third of the next ship in line behind it before you roll it out. So that gives us the capability to deliver 2 ships a year. It gives us enough space to do 2 ships per year as far as getting those ships erected and put together as you're building the ships out of modules. So right now I've got the first frigate in work going on in one of the bays, the frigate bays. The other frigate bay, I've actually in the process of erecting the second of those Saudi ships. And we actually started that and didn't put it in building 10 in the LCS because we wanted to get the experience of using the new capability that new building offers us. And so we've learned things about optimizing flow and workflow and crane utilization in that new building that's going to let us be more efficient as we start to erect the frigate. So that was the first major piece of capital investment. The second one was a new automated panel line. So when you build a ship, you start with raw steel. You start with steel plates, and you have to turn those steel plates into pieces of ships, into decks and bulkheads and overheads, and that involves bending, cutting, forming, stiffening, and you do that on a panel. So that what you start with a raw piece of steel, what you end with is a panel that can be then welded to another panel to go 3D and make the box that forms part of a ship. And then you start with the outfitting. You put in the piping, you put in the pipe hangers, you put in the wireways and the cableways, and eventually then you paint, and then eventually you insulate and put electrical equipment. And when you build that box, you can start welding boxes together to build up the ship. So that starts at a panel line. Our old panel line was a couple of cranes and about 24 welders. And now it's 4 or 5 welders, a couple of operators, and a dozen robots along that panel line. So it saves time, it saves personnel costs. It's very modern. We took the technology from other Fincantieri shipyards around the world that were using similar panel lines for the building of the FREM, for the building of Italian cruise ships, and adopted that and brought that technology here to the United States. So we now have a state-of-the-art panel line for the frigate, starting to produce panels. The other great thing about those robots is they never have a bad day. They don't, they're not mad at what happened the day before. The downside we found is the robots also don't talk back to you. So here in Marinette, if I tell an experienced welder, if I give him a procedure that doesn't make any sense, the welder will look at the supervisor and say, "We need to get field engineering here. There's no way I should be doing this. I've never done anything like this. Don't do it." And we catch mistakes that way. The very first weld we had the robot do on the very first frigate panel. We ended up gouging out and doing older, not because the robot did something wrong, but because we had programmed it wrong, and it did exactly like a robot, exactly what it was programmed to do. But again, we're getting more and more efficient and getting a lot of great capability out of that panel line. We have a world-class blast and paint facility here for the LCS and the MMSC, and it's another thing we're very proud of. It's at the top end of environmental compliance. So all the blast is kept internal to the building, the blast grit, all the ventilation, all the paint. We release no blast grit into the air environment, and it's all very contained, both the blast process and the paint process. And that building is world-class, but it is a little too small for some of the frigate modules that end up needing to be blasted and painted. So we built a new adjunct blast and paint bay here that just went into operation that will be able to handle those frigate modules, which is about a quarter of the ship, where the module that to be blasted and painted is just too big to fit into the old LCS blast and paint. We'll be able to do it in this new facility. And then we'll still keep using the existing LCS blast and paint bay for those modules that fit through that. So it expands our capability, our throughput, and again, for that. And then finally, the real crown jewel of our capital expansion is the ship lift. LCS and all the ships that this yard built before LCS were side launched. Side launching a ship is spectacular. It's visually interesting. Frankly, it's not the safest way to put a ship in the water. And if you're building a modern warship, you end up having to do more work on the water if you side launch it that you would otherwise like to do on the land, because things like a VLS launcher alignment, you can't do that on land and then side launch the ship, or you'll be doing it again. So by having a modern 10,000 ton rated synchro lift, we'll be able to roll the ship on. We use these rolling trolleys that can pick up. You hook enough of them up together, you can pick up a whole LCS or a whole future Constellation class frigate, roll it through the yard, roll it onto the transfer plat, set it down in a cradle. The transfer platform lowers it down into the river, and then somewhat like a floating dry dock, you lower the platform down low enough, ship's floating free, tugs get it, put it next to the pier. We can also pick a ship up very easily that way, drop the transfer platform, bring the ship in, pick it up in a cradle, and now you've got it up if you needed to do work on the underhull with the paint system or the shafting system or the propellers. It gives us a great capability back and forth there to get the ships in and out of the water. So that just finished last month, and we started testing this week on the new ship lift. So it's actually by the time I'll be at SNA next week, my crew here will actually be taking test loads up and down on that new ship lift. So that's the capital improvement that we've done to ready the shipyard to be ready to build the frigate.
Wow, what a fantastic rundown, Mark. Thank you very much. And while you were talking, I was chuckling to myself because one of the most and potentially the only enjoyable part of being the director of the Navy staff is Rick and I both had oversight of USS Constitution. We controlled the budget for the first of the 6 frigates, and still in commission today. So she was overhauled on my watch, and I went up to Charlestown Naval Shipyard a couple of times to see it throughout the process. And I remember somebody telling me, well, if you want to answer that question, you got to go to the senior welder. And this guy, I think his name was Mark or something like that. He'd been there for about 40 years. I'm sure he's retired by now. But before you walked into his space, and he had his own little welding shop, you had to knock on the door and request permission to enter, which I thought was pretty cool. It was like the engineering operating space on a submarine. And I went in and chatted with him for a while. And the one thing I took away from that conversation is this man's experience was unmatched. And Steve and I were talking about this yesterday. The first frigates were almost as technologically complex for our industrial base at the time, at the birth of this nation, as some of our ships are today. But we're going into things like robotics, automation, and AI. It's spectacular.
For anyone who hasn't read the book, 6 Frigates by Ian Toll, I highly recommend it. That came out when I was the DDG 51 major program manager at NAVSEA, and I read it, and I was reading the story of Joshua Humphreys, and my impression was every single problem he had in shipbuilding, I had as well. 200 years updated for technology, but the basic of trying to introduce a new technology, worrying about quality at shipyards, managing stakeholders on Capitol Hill, managing stakeholders in the Department of Navy / war bureaucracy, everything that he had to worry about, communicating his standards to the people that were on site building the ships, everything that, trying to get an innovative design built, everything that I was worried about with at the time DDG Flight 3, it was just 200 years of time, but all the basic problems were the same.
Wow, it kind of gets to my next question, and I'll combine two. One is, is there anything you need right now that you don't have to facilitate production of this magnificent Constellation class frigate? And secondly, about your people, do you hire only experienced shipbuilders and engineers, or do you have a training program? Do you take people from apprentice to qualified craftsmen? How's that going? And are you currently hiring?
So we are currently hiring right now. I've got roughly 1,100 blue collar workers in the yard, and roughly 550 white collar of different disciplines, whether that's program management, engineering. I'm pretty good. I mean, the white collar work is pretty steady. The blue collar, as we get into frigate now, that 1,100 is going to need to grow, and it's going to need to grow significantly over the next couple of years. So I've got the help wanted sign out for another, over the next couple years or so, for another 300 or so blue collar workers across the different trades. I have a great relationship with the local community college, Northeast Wisconsin Technical College. If you go there for a certificate in welding, they teach my welding procedures. It's retired welders who do the teaching. Same with pipe fitting, same with electrical, and a lot of the other key trades. So while we always look to hire experience, we have an excellent training program to hire people who really have minimal experience. If you can, if you just have a willingness to work and the ability to read, write, and do some basic math, we can teach you the rest to become an apprentice across a lot of the different shipyard trades. So and like I said, we have a great relationship with the local community college who helps us in doing that. So we have the path, we have the facilities. We are actively working in the hiring. We hired over 300 new blue collar workers in the last year, and I'd like to do that again this year as well, if not more. So those 40-year master welders, we certainly have some of those. Actually, my biggest key there is trying to retain them for as long as possible. But I do have a graying workforce, and so it's a matter of trying to keep them and get them to pass their knowledge on to the next generation, and getting that next generation of shipbuilders into the yard. If I had to pick any single challenge I have right now globally across the program, it is growing the workforce to be able to achieve the book of business that we have in the yard right now. Like most other shipyards, I would say that supply chains can be fragile. There's a lot of key components across shipbuilding where you're down to a small number of suppliers here in the United States, and that can create throughput pressure, and that can create delivery pressure. So things like shafting and certain types of electrical components, you're down to a very small number of companies that can produce the products to the NAVSEA standard. So that's another challenge we have. One of the ways we're working to overcome those challenges, and I talked about my panel line, but we are looking at automation everywhere we can possibly do automation. There's some amazing things being done right now with not just robotic welding on a panel line, but other forms of robotic welding. In Italy, they do seam welding robotically, and that's something we're looking at here. Again, it helps to be part of a worldwide company of shipbuilding. There's things that our Italian and Norwegian colleagues learn from us, and there's a whole lot of things we learn from our Italian and Norwegian colleagues. And that cross-pollination, the goal is to try and bring the very best worldwide shipbuilding techniques here to Wisconsin for the benefit of our U.S. Navy customer.
Wow, a fantastic rundown. Thanks very much for the readout on labor and also the advertisement for blue collar. You know, before Christmas, we had one of our Navy League proponents and sponsors, Orion Talent, in here. The C-suite came in to pay a call on our CEO, Mike Stevens, and myself, and they're going around to different bases and places, and they're finding young people who have made the decision to transition from the Navy, looking for a job to take those skill sets and put them back to work. And I think you have the perfect place for some
Yeah,
of the.
if any of the podcast listeners have, either they're looking for an opportunity or they might have someone in their family looking for an opportunity, our website is webuildships.com, and that takes you right to our human resources and puts you on a path towards potentially coming to work for us. So webuildships.com.
Outstanding. What a great title for the website. Thank you so much. Back to Admiral Hunt. So Rick, we kind of left a comma after condition-based maintenance. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk more about that, because I think it's revolutionary as far as maintenance and readiness, which is so important to our not just our surface Navy, but our submarine force nowadays. If you can give us a couple of groups on that. And then could you also give us a quick virtual tour from stem to stern of the combat systems on board the Constellation class frigate? You and I have talked about this a lot, and there's a piece of this in my article. On CBMs, you said it's one of the most censored ships in the Navy, and on a combat system perspective, it's got a lot of cool stuff and missiles and things that would be perfect, just perfect for the Red Sea scenario right now. So let me turn it back over to you. Combat systems, condition-based maintenance, please.
Great, Jamie, appreciate that. Yeah, people ought to recognize that really what we've got on the frigate is kind of a DDG-51 light, smaller magazine. But again, as we go into the future and directed energy becomes more and more important, I think the opportunity beyond what 51s have to adapt and pick up those capabilities in a very positive way. So just kind of walking the ship forward to aft, a Mark 110 57 millimeter gun, Alamo ammunition, guided projectiles for endgame, very capable. 32 VLS cells, they're deep cells. They can take the Standard Missile family and Tomahawks. Congress has talked about SM-6 and TLAM as capability down the road a bit. We're not looking at that at the first ship or two, but I see that in the future. So very capable. Spy-6 phased array, 3 radar planes, combined with Aegis Baseline 10. State of the art, a little bit different configuration than what we have in the DDGs and the CGs. But again, we're saying, this is AMDR. It's Aegis Baseline 10. We really are being as current as you can be for combat capability. Slick 32 electronic warfare system, V6. It's got NALCA to go with that. Naval strike missiles, we carry 16 of those amidships, most commonly associated with the best anti-ship weapon surface launch capability, again, within the free world. 21-round RAM launcher for anti-air capability. Aviation-wise, we have 2 hangars. One will be outfitted with an MH-60 Romeo, and then the other gets an MQ-8 Charlie unmanned. CAPTAS 4 variable depth sonar, again, I think the best VDS in the world today, combined with the multifunction towed array for the receiver side of that capability, makes it an exceptionally capable ASW platform. And NIXI, and we'll also have ADCs, the acoustic decoys for torpedo defense. 2 7-meter ribs, and you put that together as a package, and this is a great combat capability across the board. So I talk about the combat capability, and then I'll kind of go into condition-based maintenance plus. And even with all that great capability I just talked about, I think that the biggest thing perhaps for the surface community is to be introduced to what will lower total ownership cost, what will increase operational availability. This is a game changer. It will be this way for the entire FFG 62 class. It should go on DDG-X as we walk down that road. And then hopefully we'll do some backfittings into the DDGs. Harder to do that than to build it from the ground up. So this is a new approach to surface ship maintenance. So we do planned maintenance system. It's based on time or repetitions. We try to do enough maintenance that we don't have a failure. So we probably overdo it by quite a bit. We have censored all the rotating equipment on the engineering side of the ship. That sensor feeds into the network. We do real-time understanding of the material condition of all the equipment. So they'll see that in CCS. The engineers will have that availability as opposed to looking in their wheel book and trying to take best guess on how reliable that diesel is. They will know we're tracking remaining useful life until you need to do a maintenance action. So you've got ground truth, kind of like you do in CIC for combat systems, except you'll have it for that critical part of keeping the ship running. Very, very important to have. You combine that with predictive analytics, and you can now be alerted to make sure you know what the time frame is to do maintenance activities, to take a look at what capability you need with upcoming missions, and that gives you an automated, digital twin back ashore where they want to do that kind of stuff. Capability to keep people on track at all times, and the goal is to prevent failure. And in the commercial world, that really happens because you see stuff, even if it starts taking a hiccup and going south rapidly, you still see it in time to intervene, light off an additional piece of equipment, take this guy out of service and do maintenance. So knowing and understanding in a great way. So what's it do? It gives you, a reduction of sailors' maintenance times. And quite frankly, some people say up to a third of the casualties we have in the fleet are caused by improper maintenance. So how about if you do less of that, less opportunity for something to go wrong? It improves operational availability. By contract, we're on the hook to get it up to 72%. It's pretty high against any standards of other surface ships today. Prevents equipment failures. I think the predictive analytics will help inform data-driven decisions on what we do for maintenance. So we get down and do it when it's needed, not based on some timing that has you doing more maintenance than you need to do. And frankly, I think this goes to a reduction of discovery when we go into intermediate and depot level maintenance activities, because again, you know what the status is. You've been tracking that all along, and that provides greater planning, more effective utilization of that time. So it's real time on the ship, informing the maintainers the what and the when they've got to do stuff. And then it's better for planning and execution of that long-term maintenance and upgrade capability that we have. This is going to be a game changer for the fleet. I said in the competition, it gives you twice the A sub O, and it does it with about half the sailor hours that it takes to do the maintenance. Unbelievable. When you combine that with hull monitoring and noise and vibration monitoring, like you said, Jamie, this will be the most internally censored surface combatant in the Navy. And it's going to put us in a really, really good place for managing the life cycle costs, the repair costs, and where we go. And that's driving an awful lot of what our struggles are in the surface community today. We're going to fix that.
Rick, what an outstanding rundown. Just listening to you, sends shivers up and down my spine. I'm thinking, what a great and capable warship. It harkens back to, I hate to say it, I was thinking about it this morning, 47 years ago when I was a plebe reading Reef Points, and John Paul Jones's famous quote, give me a fast ship because I intend to go in harm's way. That's exactly what our sailors and officers and chiefs are doing in the Red Sea right now. Mark, kudos to you for those magnificent Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that are holding the Houthis at bay. I'm going to talk to CBS on Monday about this in their studio in Washington, and kudos to the Surface Navy, which brings me to my last point, and that is, Rick, you do all this great work in shipbuilding, but you're also a volunteer as president of the Surface Navy Association. That is a significant lift. You've been doing it now for years. This next week, we will celebrate the Surface Navy Association's S&A Symposium here in Washington, D.C. I'll be there. You've got an incredible lineup. You got the Secretary of the Navy coming. You've got the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Franchetti, my former Sixth Fleet Commander, Admiral Caudle, a guy from Naples in CTF 69 and Subgroup 8. Admiral Brendan McLean, who took over from Roy Kitchener. Roy and I were together at Strike Force NATO. Brendan was my mock director. What a lineup. Anything you want to say about S&A as we turn the corner and head into it?
Well, no, thanks for asking. I think this one's going to be a great one. By all accounts right now, this could be the biggest number of participants that we have. You gave a great rundown. I throw VC&O. Admiral Kilby's going to be there. He's going to be the banquet speaker. We couldn't go final on him until he got in the seat yesterday, or I'll say it last Thursday to match with the podcast release. But it's going to be terrific. And when you take a look at what's going on around the globe, you talked about this in the beginning. These panels are zeroed in on that. They're going to address that. This year's theme is the fight the force in the future. I can't think of a better theme. I will tell you that I've been out talking to the different surface warfare leaders as they're putting it together, and they are doing it. There's going to be, I think, a very aligned message from the community, which I see as powerful. I think industry is going to like what they're hearing. They're going to understand the importance of what they do and how critical it is to feeding our sailors at sea that are going in harm's way in these very challenging times. So this is great. And I just kind of close and say, I'd encourage everyone who can attend to make it. Learn from our speakers, actively engage with our industry teammates on the exhibition floor, and also be there for Q&A and engage there. They are ready to address these things, to answer the questions. And I think as good as any of the association shows, this one is intimate, it's close, there's open, transparent conversations going on throughout. Everybody ought to do that. So this is a must-see event. And I think the surface leadership has stepped up to make sure it's going to be that way. I hope to see you there. And Jamie, I thank you for the opportunity for the podcast here and talking about what we're doing in Marinette, how important that is for frigate, and certainly get on with the symposium. And that's going to be a great one for everybody.
Thank you very much, Rick and Mark. And one editorial note before we sign off here, and that is, we were having a conversation before we came on the podcast about the dog on USS Vandegrift. Steve mentioned that, but there was no context for that. I have to tell you that dog was one of the most popular dogs, not only in the crew, but in the Navy at the time. And the commanding officer was a classmate of mine that Steve worked for, Neil Kuzumoto. Neil's now retired. He was with, Smedig out there in San Diego, but he wrote a book. It's called Navy Dog, and it's zooming up to #1 on Amazon. I'd recommend it to anybody. And it's about, what was that dog's name?
Jenna,
yeah.
the
Sea Dog. And, we're going to have a up for debate series here in a month or so about dogs or no dogs on ships. So just a funny note. And if you haven't read that book, get it. You'll love it. Folks, that's a wrap. I want to thank Vice Admiral Hunt and Captain Vandroff for their insights and getting us smart ahead of SNA 2024. I'd like to thank our listeners for joining us each month. If you have not heard our previous episodes, you can always catch up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. Episodes and all content described here today can be found on our new website, www.centerformaritimestrategy.org, all lowercase. And finally, a shout out to our sound engineer, James Peterson, for his work in recording and redacting this session. Stay tuned for the next episode of Maritime Nation. Thank you, gentlemen. Out here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.